Hi, I'm Kelly Monaco, and welcome again to Boys Toys Week on the History Channel. I'm in this body shop because it's here that cars, a boys' toys favorite, are made to look their very best. For the next few hours, we've got more than just cars. We're going to take an exciting look at private collections. Everything from motorcycles to sports memorabilia to military vehicles. We'll also show you Steven Seagal's guitars and 10,000 golf clubs that belong to Arnold Palmer. You don't want anything to stop you from missing it. It's coming up right now, only on the History Channel.
They're classics, defined by power, speed, and brute force. This collection is not for the weak or timid. These cars are just like their owner, all muscle.
Why do I collect muscle cars? I think it fits the persona pretty well. You know, I didn't intend it to be that way, but it's just the guy, the person that I am.
Every car in his collection has an intimidating roar. With a few modern-day exceptions, he's based his collection on the cars of his youth.
When I was a kid, most of my friends had older brothers. Most of those older brothers were into muscle cars. And I always looked up to them, you know, and always wanted to be like them because they had these cool cars.
After success as an NFL football player and international stardom as a professional wrestler, Goldberg began the car collection of his dreams.
I got to a position where I could fortunately purchase one, and one led to two, and two led to five, and five led to 10, and I think 10's led to 20, and you know, the sky's the limit. I personally don't believe I'll ever stop collecting these things. They're so much fun.
Muscle cars were first made in the 1960s. Often called supercars, they utilized high-performance factory engines built for race cars. The one that fits Goldberg the best is a customized clone of a 1970 Chrysler Challenger.
I had built to my specifications exactly how I wanted it. Visually, performance-wise, it came out exactly how I wanted it. It couldn't be any more beautiful as far as I'm concerned.
The body is original, but under the hood, it's far from standard.
One thing that makes it special is that it's a 1968 date-coded true Hemi motor. I have a race radiator on it. Carburetor was made by Demon Carburetors. They put the nitrous system on it for me. This car is nothing but business.
Named for the engine's hemispherical combustion chamber, Dodge's 5.7-liter Hemi V8 produces 345 horsepower. Goldberg can add a quick burst of speed with his nitrous oxide injection system.
Throws nitrous oxide right straight down through the carburetor, which gives you anywhere from a 50 to 3 to 400 horsepower boost.
For Goldberg, each car is a reminder of his past. His Shelby GT500 evokes painful memories.
There's a lot of emotion going into buying a car. Every day that I was sitting in my orthodontist chair as a kid and he was cranking on my teeth and causing me so much pain, the only positive thing that I could derive from that experience was looking out the window at his 1967 GT500 that was British Racing Green. So guess what? Now I have one.
Designed by champion race car driver Carroll Shelby, the Mustang GT is powered by a 500 horsepower 428 Super Cobra Jet engine.
This is the one that I always envisioned buying when I started my collection. This was the one car that I wanted to obtain.
For Goldberg, the thrill is in the fun. Many of his cars are purchased at auction.
It's an absolutely wonderful experience, and it's really hard not to get caught up in it. First year I went, I bought a car that I had no idea that I'd buy.
Goldberg has enlisted Bob Johnson, a car broker, to search for the perfect cars to add to the collection.
Anytime you are collecting muscle cars or collecting anything for that matter, there's always going to be forgeries, there's always going to be misrepresentations. You're always running that risk of being duped. And fortunately, that's what Bob Johnson's for.
Johnson helped with the purchase of a 1968 Camaro Supersport Yenko for $106,000.
It's a 4-speed 427, totally original car. 40,000 miles on it. Clicked 40,000 when I got it in the garage. I put 13 miles on it since. It's just one unbelievably fast car. It was basically made to drag race.
There were only 32 1968 Chevy Yankos made with a 427 engine. But that's not the rarest vehicle in the collection. That distinction belongs to the Lawman. The 1,000 horsepower 429 Superboss was commissioned by the military to teach soldiers how to handle a muscle car because of the growing number of racing casualties while on leave. Only 2 were ever made.
One was crushed in transit. They were predominantly used in Air Force bases and aircraft carriers to make runs, do quarter miles or do eighth miles.
Purchased at auction for $118,000, the Lawman is housed at the Muscle Car Museum in Tennessee. It is the only car in the collection he's never driven.
Honestly, the only reason why I haven't driven it is because I've never seen it. When I see it, I guarantee you I will get behind the wheel and I will drive that thing.
The most expensive car in Goldberg's collection is a contemporary one.
If you want a Ferrari, if you're not on the list, then you have to wait. You have to buy a used Ferrari.
Goldberg paid over $200,000 for the Ferrari Modena. The car is powered by a 3.6-liter V8 engine with a top speed of 185 miles an hour.
Listening to it, smelling it, driving it is almost as cool as just sitting here looking at it.
Like the Ferrari, Goldberg's 1959 Chevy Biscayne is painted his favorite color, black.
That's a classic car, all you gotta do is look at the fins in the back. This is my beach car. Seems as if it'd be pretty cool with my surfboard hanging out the back of it.
Goldberg is in the process of relocating his collection from Atlanta, Georgia to Southern California. A 15-car garage is being built to house all the vehicles. Even though he collects for pleasure, there is a business side to owning these expensive cars.
I find that these cars definitely hold their value in good and bad times in the economy.
They're powerful and complement his muscular physique. This is one collection that seems to fit its owner's persona perfectly. As the sun sets on a world champions collection in the West, it soon rises on the larger-than-life collection of Steven Seagal. He's an international action superstar, known for his martial arts skills and signature ponytail. But when this big-screen hero isn't on the set of his latest movie, you'll most likely find him collecting the things he loves.
I have some of the best swords in the world. And I have some of the best guitars in the world.
I think he's happy with both guitar and sword in his hand. One at a time, of course.
His passion for swords began in the country where he sought enlightenment, Japan.
I came here in the late 60s, early 70s, and stayed here until about 1985. I came here to study the martial arts, Aikido, Karate, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu.
Part of Seagal's martial arts training included the use of the sword. Once he began to master the weapon, he started his most beloved collection.
I probably had 10 to 12 swords that were, within the history of Japan, amazingly important and significant.
Samurai warriors emerged during the Heian period, from 794 to 1185. These warriors were sought after by feudal lords for protection from rival clans. Battles were constant and fierce. Many of the swords were modified to reduce the weight.
Here you have a sword that's almost 1,000 years old, and it feels, I can't even feel the weight in my hand. I feel like a feather. The balance is that good.
Crafted by repeatedly heating and pounding steel, making a sword was more than just an act of labor. It was also a sacred ritual.
When these sword masters made a sword, they didn't eat for sometimes weeks. They fasted, they prayed, they went inside the katana kaji, and they made something that was supposed to be exemplary of their own spiritual quest.
Upon completion, a blade would frequently be tested for sharpness and durability on the bodies of deceased criminals. The results were often documented on the handle.
It'll say, this sword cut through 5 bodies as a test, and sometimes it's in gold.
Seagal considers it an honor to own such ancient historic symbols. More than just weapons, he believes they are well-designed works of art.
To us, it's like looking at a Picasso or a Rembrandt, but these are older.
Collecting swords can be an expensive proposition.
Swords can go upwards of $1 million just by virtue of what they are, not necessarily who they belong to.
But swords aren't his only passion. He also has a collection of almost 300 guitars. Many of these instruments were hard to find.
I collect guitars because I'm a serious player and I've been playing since I was a child. And I love guitar and I play all kinds of different music.
Seagal uses his collection in the studio and on stage. Unlike other musicians and collectors, he is willing to risk some of his most prized guitars by taking them on the road.
I travel with these, I just don't let them out of my sight.
Not only are the guitars rare, they're made more valuable by the artists who played them.
Celebrity guitars have value higher than non-celebrity guitars that really doesn't relate to the value of the guitar as much as it relates to the aura of the celebrity who owned it or played it.
The collection includes pieces once owned by Lenny Kravitz, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Jimi Hendrix's Stratocaster.
Jimmy had thousands of Strats, but he only had one Jazzmaster since he became Jimi Hendrix. And this guitar is a real special feeling guitar.
Seagal loves rock and roll, but the roots of his collection are in the blues.
It's the people who made blues come to life in the United States of America and all over the world.
He owns 4 guitars from B.B. King, which all hold his signature name of Lucille.
I don't have one favorite. There are certain sort of spiritual guitars that have tremendous spiritual meaning to me, like the Tele that Albert Collins used a lot.
Albert Collins earned the name the Master of the Telecaster.
He himself put this kind of psychedelic sticker on here, and I think he was one of the greatest blues guitar players of our time.
But Steven Seagal believes that the birth of the blues is represented elsewhere in his collection.
I was born and raised in the blues, and so if you really play blues, I think you have to be able to play an acoustic also.
Seagal owns many old acoustics, which are reminiscent of the blues. But some of the rarest and greatest acoustic guitars in Seagal's collection are manufactured by Martin Guitars.
I have a lot of old Martins, pre-war Martins.
Seagal's pre-World War II D45 is considered one of the best-sounding acoustic guitars in the world.
It has the snowflake inlay on the neck, but it also has tuners that are factory tuners that are kind of gold. There's only a few of those in the world.
You hear stories about the D45s in particular, a guitar that sold new for $225, trading in the market for anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000, depending on the condition.
C.F. Martin started his guitar company nearly 2 centuries ago. Since then, they have successfully produced many of the finest collectible guitars known to man.
The craftsmanship is impeccable.
Taking over 2 years to build, the 1 millionth Martin is the rarest and most valuable guitar they have ever crafted. It has 30 rubies, 40 diamonds, and is surrounded by 18-karat gold.
It's such a magnificent piece of art, you know. You can't argue with it at all. I mean, this is a museum piece.
They're going to be, pretty rare.
For Seagal, judging the collectability of guitars is a matter of personal taste.
I collect the different kinds of guitars, not necessarily for how valuable they are, but by virtue of how they look and sound and play.
Whether it's guitars or even swords, Steven Seagal's collections are a reflection of his favorite things in life.
For me, it's a reverence, and it's only natural to be able to collect those things and revere and admire them.
Along with guitars and swords, Steven Seagal also collects Tibetan Buddhas. modern marvels, private collections will return next on the History Channel. Of all the collectors in the world, only a few can claim a collection of these. Airplanes, the classic kind. Collector and pilot Kermit Weeks has a remarkable collection of over 140 planes that span 100 years of aviation technology. And unlike most planes of this distinction that never leave the protection of an airplane hangar, all of Kermit's flying machines take to the sky.
I don't collect anything that I don't intend to fly one day. So the airplanes in the collection either have flown, do fly, or will fly.
Valued at over $40 million, with some of the planes considered priceless, Kermit Weeks has assembled the world's largest private collection.
I think airplanes are kind of like people. They all have their own quirks, idiosyncrasies, qualities. You know, you have to love them all.
Kermit was drawn to the world of aviation at age 13 by the popular song Snoopy and the Red Baron. Little did he know it would change the course of his life.
A spark lit inside me, and at that point in my life, I became fascinated with aviation.
By age 17, Kermit Weeks had built his first airplane and began performing aerial acrobatics in a dangerous sport called aerobatics.
Because I was competing on my high school gymnastic team, when I was used to flipping around in the gym, when I started to learn how to fly, I immediately gravitated towards flipping around in airplanes.
Kermit's love for anything having to do with aviation took new flight when his grandfather shared his fortune from the oil business with the rest of the family. Kermit immediately started collecting airplanes.
I began with one when I was about 25 years old. It led to another, and it just kind of snowballed and started going downhill from there. And that's how the collection process began.
Many of his planes are authentic reproductions. Every effort is made to recreate the smallest detail.
We have a number of airplanes in the collection from the early period that we built from scratch, but we always try and maintain a high degree of authenticity.
The plane that first piqued his interest in aviation is now part of his collection. An exact replica of the triplane flown by the German World War I flying ace Manfred von Richthofen. Known as the Red Baron, Richthofen led a German squadron often referred to as the Flying Circus.
The Germans painted their airplanes up in very gaudy colors. That's where they came up with the phrase the Flying Circus, because they used to move around the front on trains, and the airplanes would show up in pieces, kind of like a circus would when it arrived in town.
Both World War I German aircraft in the collection utilize a unique engine.
Normally, the crankshaft goes around and is bolted to the propeller. On this particular engine, the crankshaft is fixed, the engine is bolted to the propeller, and the whole engine spins around with the propeller.
The German World War I rotary engines do not have a throttling system. This makes for an airplane that can sound unsafe.
The early ones were either full throttle on, or you would actually shut the spark off to the spark plugs. It's a very unique sounding engine. The pilot operates out with a button on the stick and a little 5-position switch on the side of the cockpit.
If pilots managed to survive their mission, they then had to face the challenge of landing the plane. No airplanes built prior to 1929 had brakes.
I ended up going off the side of the runway, and I put it up on its nose. I broke the propeller. This is a brand new propeller, so hopefully the next time I'll have better success.
With a list of aircraft that reads like an aviation who's who, Kermit's collection is a tribute to the innovation and imagination of the pioneers of flight.
I actually have major focal points within the collection, like the largest private collection of vintage World War I airplanes, the largest private collection of World War II fighter planes, the largest bomber collection in the world, the largest collection of British airplanes in the world.
Many of the aircraft serve as a reminder of historic and heroic events, like the tiny single-engine plane that Charles Lindbergh flew as the first person to make a solo non-stop flight across the Atlantic.
The original Spirit of St. Louis, of course, is at the Smithsonian Institute, and rightly so, although I'd love to have it in my collection. But we have the next best thing. We have a very authentic reproduction of the airplane with all the original size fuel tanks.
One of Lindbergh's greatest challenges was where to put the 400 gallons of fuel he would need to complete the 33.5-hour non-stop flight. To keep the plane balanced as it emptied, the tank was placed at the plane's center of gravity, right in front of the pilot's seat, blocking his vision.
So literally, Lindbergh is looking at 400 gallons of fuel when he's flying. They have two little windows on the side of the airplane, which he can look out of, and that's how you fly.
Another famous replica is a plane that was destroyed while attempting to break the world speed record in 1931, the GBZ.
It's very interesting to fly. Probably looks more like a cartoon character than any airplane that was built. And they took the biggest engine of the day and made the smallest airplane around it. Probably one of the most recognizable airplanes of the early racing period.
The historic Ford Trimotor was used to transport passengers from New York to Los Angeles in the early 1930s.
A lot of people got the first introduction safe flying when the airline's in a Ford Trimotor. A lot of the cables for the control systems are actually outside the airplane.
Amelia Earhart greeted this exact plane in the promotional film Coast to Coast in 48 Hours. That same plane also starred with Harrison Ford at the controls in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The Ford Trimotor was one of the safest planes of its day. But other planes in the collection flew for the safety and security of the world.
The airplane that I'm going to fly today is a very rare airplane. There's only 4 of these early original airplanes in the world.
Kermit's P-51C is one of the rarest original planes in his collection, valued at over $2 million. These deadly, fast, high-flying, fuel-efficient planes were named Mustangs and were flown during World War II by the Tuskegee Airmen, the first black American fighter pilots. Their reputation for protecting bombers is legendary for never having lost a bomber to enemy aircraft. This plane is painted in honor of pilot Lee Buddy Archer, the highest-scoring Tuskegee Airman. The symbols on the side of the plane represent his kills.
It's so steeped in history. The performance is awesome. It was a state-of-the-art fighter at the end of World War II. I mean, this thing was built for a purpose, and it's a dream and a privilege to fly something like this.
Another of Kermit's rare planes from World War II is a bomber with a notorious nickname, the Widowmaker.
It's a Martin B-26 Marauder. They only probably have 7 left on the planet. This is the only one that flies. They had a lot of training accidents in this airplane early on, but it actually had one of the best combat records of any of the medium bombers in the whole European theater for the American bomber.
The plane that used to drop 5,000-pound bombs during World War II drops a very different type of ammo today.
We take it down to an air show in Fort Lauderdale once a year. We actually drop watermelons out of it today, so still bombing.
Playing around on these planes can cost a pretty penny. With twin 2,000 horsepower engines, the aircraft consumes 160 gallons of gasoline per hour.
It's expensive, but the reality is the airplanes are so expensive. If you have to ask how much it costs in fuel, you're not in the market to buy one.
The largest airplane in Kermit's collection is actually a flying boat called the Short Sunderland.
It's the last 4-engine passenger flying boat that still flies on the planet. We brought it back across the Atlantic Ocean from England 10 years ago. It was the last crossing of a flying boat, a 4-engine flying boat over a major ocean.
Kermit was able to pilot the flying boat back to Florida, but other planes still await the journey.
Actually, a lot of the collection is not here on site. I've got airplanes stashed around the world. Ultimately, we hope to house everything here in Central Florida.
As amazing as the collection is, it was almost decimated when Hurricane Andrew struck Miami in 1992.
The hangar was completely destroyed. completely fell in on all my airplanes. A number of airplanes outside were blown over a mile away.
There was millions of dollars in damage, and most of the collection was not covered by insurance.
There was about 30 minutes of tears and utter just disbelief, really, and then there was so much work to do.
Most of the collection is now repaired. It's housed and displayed at Fantasy of Flight in Central Florida.
The collection really transcends value and ownership to me, and I really hope I can use them in a way that can touch people in a profound way.
Kermit's collection speaks for heroes in our history who never gave up, pushed their personal limits, and soared to their ultimate dreams. The B-29 Super Fortress is the biggest and most fuel-consuming plane in Kermit Weeks' collection. It consumes roughly 350 gallons per hour. Modern Marvel's private collections will return next on the History Channel. This collection has raced, jumped, and crashed in movies and on racetracks around the world. Motorcycles, more than 200 of them. All owned by a daredevil turned stuntman.
There's no question that motorcycles started my career and are still a very big part of it.
His profession is his collection. And for Gary Davis, motorcycles are a good life.
People say that I have a big collection of motorcycles, or they say this is a motorcycle museum. Truth of the matter is, this is just my toy box.
Davis's giant toy box is a 9,000 square foot shop next to his Northern California home. The collection is relatively new, but he's been playing with motorcycles since he was 14.
When I was a kid in high school, I had a 160 Honda, but if you were cool, you had a Gold Star, and I couldn't afford a Gold Star.
The BSA Gold Star DBD-34 was the most advanced motorcycle engine of its time. It dominated racing during the 60s and was one of the last Gold Stars ever produced.
I have a few of them, and I purchased this one recently. It's kind of rough looking, as you can see. All my Gold Stars are DBD-34, which is sought after motors.
Even though while growing up he didn't have his dream bike, Davis had riding talent.
You have to be subtle about the movements you make on a motorcycle and stuff, and for some reason it came fairly natural to me.
All through high school, riding was just for fun. When he started racing, things turned serious.
I got second my first race.
He went on to be state champion. Soon, he was pro. But racing wasn't the only way to make a living in 1969. Top daredevil Evel Knievel was getting rich jumping over cars. Gary felt he could do even better, but it meant taking riding to the extreme.
In 1971, I started jumping motorcycles over cars for a living, a la Evel Knievel. My partner Rex Blackwell and myself used to cross in the air, and on our third jump, we went for the world record and jumped 21 cars, beating Evel's 19-car record at Ontario Motor Speedway.
The 1971 350 Honda Twin Davis rode to break the world record is still part of his collection. For a short time, Davis and Knievel continuously tried to outcompete each other. But when Hollywood came calling, Davis jumped at the chance to perform stunts in a movie about the legendary Daredevil.
They needed a stuntman to come in and jump 120 feet while they blew both ramps up. And it sounded like an exciting endeavor, so I joined the picture business.
Gary thought he had done just about everything there was to do on a motorcycle, but the movie business forced him to do something he had always avoided.
Doubling Knievel, I had to throw the bike away at very high speeds, but I've never ever really been hurt on a bike at all. I've never broken any bones on a motorcycle.
To date, he has worked on over 300 movies and TV shows. Now a stunt coordinator and director, he's been able to employ his collection.
Most of my newer bikes are using lots of stones, but up on the top shelf up there's the bike I used as Captain America, and we did two different pilots.
This 1976 Mako appeared with Gary in one of the very first movies about motocross.
We actually built 5 bikes that were called Sidewinder 1s for a movie called Sidewinder 1, and I only kept the 1.
Davis has also collected Evel Knievel memorabilia. No longer rivals. Today, they are friends.
So I have, you know, his toys and his lunch boxes and posters and costumes and all kinds of stuff that kids would have had at that time.
Even though he loves the movie business, Gary really needs his downtime between pictures.
If I didn't have my motorcycles to come down here and work on every day, I'd have to be going to a shrink a couple of times a week.
There is no shortage of bikes to work on. Many, like this Vincent Lightning, are works in progress.
They're a fairly sought-after bike. They're highly respected. They were ahead of their time in almost everything they did. Their suspension, if you look at the suspension, is done like when Yamaha was so proud of themselves and they called themselves a monoshock. They built this triangular structured swing arm with a single shock that ran up underneath the tank. Well, here's a bike from the early 50s that has the same exact suspension.
When completed, the Vincent will be a legal street bike. Many of the motorcycles take a long time to finish. Gary pieces them together, one part at a time. If something is missing, he'll place an order for the part, but by the time it arrives, he's off working on the next.
Most of the bikes I buy are in pretty rough shape, actually, because it's no fun for me to buy a restored motorcycle. That's somebody else's labor of love.
When restoring a motorcycle, Gary is willing to make alterations that purists wouldn't like.
On something like this Vincent, 90% of this bike is accurate to the era. However, I have aluminum wheels and stainless steel spokes, aluminum hubs, and things that it didn't necessarily have that I personally want in slightly later model carburetors. A true collector would diminish the points on my bike.
Another valuable bike in Gary's collection is the 1965 Triumph.
This is the most sought after of the stock Triumph frames. This is the frame that when TrackMaster first started, they designed all their geometry off of. Triumph prior to this year and after this year always had the forks raked out.
Bike after bike, each one slightly different from the next. They almost all have one thing in common.
In both motocross and in flat track, I'm 89. That's my current racing number. That's the number I rode when I was a professional racer. And then in road race, it was already taken, so I'm 890. And then in trials, I just run a number 2 on the front because that's the line that I run in the trials events.
If he's not working on his collection, Gary can be found on the track, testing his motorcycles prior to a race.
We'll go out and make a few laps and see if she still runs anyway. This is my little 350 Honda single, and it's in a TrackMaster frame, TrackMaster forks. And all my bikes have the kickstarters removed for flat trackers and my road racers, so I use this to start them so I don't have to push them all the time because I'm getting too old to run behind them, you know. So let's see if I can even get her to run. I was being very cautious, you know. When the throttle started sticking and getting me a little close to the edges with the throttle on, I decided it was time to quit.
The oldest and rarest motorcycles Gary races are part of a class named after a prehistoric creature.
The dinosaur class is pre-51 or earlier motorcycle, and it's a 500cc limit with the exception of Harley-Davidson and Indians are allowed to run 750cc's. This is the 1951 Triumph 500. It's a rigid frame and it runs the dinosaur class.
Sometimes he will combine bikes for better performance.
This motorcycle is what they call a trib suds because it's a Triumph 650 motorcycle engine in a BSA A10 chassis. It handles like a Gold Star except it has the Triumph twin motor in it. They're two of my favorite motocrossers actually, although they're both pretty heavy to be thrown around on a constant pace.
All the bikes in the collection are serious riding machines, except for one.
I have a little road racer that's called a pocket bike. It's about 2 foot long and 16 inches high that is almost impossible to ride from a guy my size.
Davis also has an extremely rare collectible, which he believes is a museum piece.
The Yamaha YDS-1R is one of my prized possessions. It's one of only 3 known to exist in America. It's the first production road racer Yamaha built. It's the highest classed motorcycle I have in my collection.
A sentimental favorite is a 1918 Indian known as a flat tracker. Davis likes it so much, he separated it from the rest of his collection and keeps it in his house.
I love the era as much as I do the bike. I love the way that racing was treated in those days, that it was a high-class event. In the early days in board track racing, the bikes were nothing more than a bicycle with a big V-twin engine in it.
Built by a legend in motorcycles, the 1956 BSA Gold Star holds the greatest sentimental value to Davis.
This bike was built by Ray Hensley. He was the founder of both Sonic Weld and of Trackmaster Frames. It was the last motorcycle that he assembled before his death, and I miss him a lot, and this bike will never be away from me.
Davis does have a few modern bikes in his collection, but that doesn't mean they sit well with him.
This is a Enduro model that I just use for playing around on the ranch. This is a modern bike, so it feels alien to me already. You know, I mean, it's a nice cush bike, but I'm not used to that.
As long as Davis is around his toys, he feels like a big kid.
I don't want to ever grow up.
With a collection this size, he'll be playing with motorcycles for the rest of his life. Gary Davis has broken his back and shattered his ankle while performing stunts for TV and movies, but he's never been injured while riding a motorcycle. Modern Marvels Private Collections will return next on the History Channel. They're made to go anywhere, across land, over water, and through just about anything. Get out of the way. This collection is unstoppable.
Some people say it's strange, but it's definitely boys and their toys.
It's every boy's fantasy to play with toys like these. For Charles Burnett III, it's a dream come true. He owns a personal armored fleet, a virtual army of more than 30 military vehicles. They use treads, tracks, and propellers to go almost anywhere.
My collection, I'm particularly interested in vehicles that are designed to get through the most challenging and tough environments, whether it be ice or snow or swamps or water.
With a total weight of more than 200 tons, the collection of tanks and multi-purpose military craft are all housed near Burnett's spectacular home in southern England. Burnett's own backyard provides the perfect battlefield.
This is why it's some of the best testing grounds in the world here, because you've got mud, you've got rock, you've got water. So if you can get through this, you can get through just about anything.
The terrain is ideal, but that isn't the only reason the Texan keeps his collection at his second home.
One of the great things about England is that driving track vehicles is not specifically prohibited by law as long as you have the correct licenses.
It's not uncommon to see Burnett in one of his massive machines as he takes a joyride through town. But not everyone in the neighborhood shares his enthusiasm.
It's a pretty conservative area around here, so I bet a lot of people think he's pretty strange. But most of the people of my generation take him pretty much just as a bit of an odd bod who he's a bit wacky and he likes to have a good time.
I'm considered a bit on the eccentric side, but as long as I'm not rolling over anybody's front garden, they're not going to be too upset about it.
Burnett uses his war machines to go up, over, through, and into just about anything. For fun, he stages battles. Each vehicle in his collection excels in specific combat situations.
If I was in a swamp condition and needed to travel fast, certainly the American Otter is the one I'd pick.
The M76 Otter was produced from 1942 until 1953. U.S. forces utilized over 200 Otters during the Korean War. The vehicle carried up to 4 tons of cargo, but its thin aluminum plating made it vulnerable to attack.
If you slam the brakes on hard enough, you can actually tip it right up onto its nose, and then it'll flop back down again.
On land, rubber tires and tracks power the Otter to speeds up to 30 miles per hour. In water, it can go just about anywhere, except for the open sea. That's for another of Burnett's military vehicles, the English-made Stalwart.
It has four-wheel steering, six-wheel drive. It's a great cross-country vehicle. Swims with the help of twin jet drives, so you can get up to 6-7 miles an hour in the water, and it carries about 10 tons in the back.
The Stalwart followed tanks into battle with supplies of ammunition and fuel. From the late 1960s to the early 1990s, the British Army utilized the Stalwart. It appeared in British campaigns in Belize, the Falklands, and Cyprus.
So it may look like a submarine, but actually, in practice, you don't close the hatches because in case it does sink, you want to be able to get out again.
Not far from his backyard, Burnett tests the Stalwart and other large amphibious craft in deep water that leads into the English Channel. It's rare for his vehicles to sink, but there are other risks when entering the water.
First thing to check is to make sure that you can get out again. So we want to make sure that wherever we have to come back to is dry and firm enough to get us out. We want to make sure there's not a big tidal run going. 7-8 knot tides are not uncommon out here. So with a vehicle that only goes 5 miles an hour, you can readily understand how you can end up in the English Channel if you're not careful.
We got no water drive, is that right? Come back?
That's correct.
Okay, we'll be on our way over. This is really treacherous mud. Some of the worst in the world. Gets high tide under it, and it gets very loose and soft, so you can't use the tracks or the wheels to get you out, so you have to rely on your drives or somebody else that has got more traction than you do. So at the moment, we probably have more traction. Being a track vehicle, we're going to go and give them a little bit of a help there, drag them out of the mud, and keep from having to wait for the rising tide to bring us in.
In difficult situations like these, Burnett deploys a massive machine called the Aquatrack.
The only vehicle in the world with 7 stations. That means it has actually 7 wheels in contact with the ground. The later prototypes were actually made too wide to legally go on the road. This is legal by 1 millimeter on each side, as long as the yellow beacon is turning up the top.
One of the rarest vehicles in Burnett's collection, the Aquatrack was never put into production. Only 3 were ever made. Diesel-powered, the Aquatrack has a top land speed of over 40 miles per hour. Most of the vehicles in Burnett's collection perform best on land, and the Snowcat was made to handle some of Mother Nature's worst conditions.
The Snowcat was probably more designed to cover snow and ice than it was to be truly amphibious, but having said that, it will cross still lakes with relative ease.
Utilized by the British Army in the Falklands and both Gulf Wars, the Snowcat moves across land at 40 miles an hour. Automatic transmission makes it easy for even a novice to drive.
It's not armored, but it's very light, mobile, and agile, and gets up and down most banks.
A surprising number of dry land military vehicles are capable of amphibious activity. Even this Jeep.
This is a 50s era Jeep that we got from the Dutch Army. It was quite a capable little vehicle. By the 50s, they developed a fording capacity. In fact, there's a lever on the dash that you can pull that pressurizes the differential in the engine to keep the water out. And with a snorkel, you can actually completely submerge the vehicle.
With a weight of 17 tons, the Abbott self-propelled gun has a firing range of over 9 miles. Used by armies around the world, it can go just about anywhere in an emergency.
It will actually float. There are poles that go around in these holders at the front, and there's a screen that goes on it. And with that, it has enough buoyancy that it will actually stay above the water, if you're lucky.
Another tank, the Spartan, is effective on soft ground, despite a weight of 8 tons.
It is also an armored vehicle, although not heavily armored, mainly used for reconnaissance and quick thrust behind enemy line, but not something that you want to get stuck in if the rocket-propelled grenades are going off.
The Spartan can travel up to 60 miles per hour, thanks to a souped-up Jaguar engine. But that isn't the only vehicle in the collection associated with a high-performance automobile. The Ferret is powered by a Rolls-Royce engine.
It's a fun vehicle to drive. It's light, it's nimble. It can take a crew of up to 3. and also able to drive it on the roads here, license it, as you can see, for road use quite happily. And as long as you take care not to get too many fender benders.
For Charles Burnett, the vehicles are made to be driven, and he wouldn't have it any other way. But the machines aren't always the easiest to operate.
Something from the Eastern Bloc, the staple of their reconnaissance and scout cars were these Fugs. They also came armed, and they had an interesting characteristic. They have pneumatic wheels that will drop down, try and get yourself out of a hole that you might have got into.
First built in 1968 for the Hungarian military, many Fugs are still used by Eastern European countries. Burnett purchased an extra just for spare parts.
We can't understand a lot of the directions because they're all in Russian or Polish on the plates inside.
Having your own armada can be a lot of fun, but at the end of the day, there's still work to be done.
The salt water can corrode and just generally destroy. So as soon as we've been out in the salt water in the ocean, we try and spray it down with water, give it a good wash, try and get it as clean as possible.
It's not easy to maintain a collection of vehicles from around the world. Burnett relies on his mechanic, Bruce Simpson.
I'm mechanical by nature. I mean, I joined the army at 16 and did 9 years in Royal Corps Transport. When I first started working for them, we had 2 vehicles. Now we're up to some 37, 38 vehicles. I'm responsible for finding them, and sometimes I'm responsible for getting them into trouble with them.
When Simpson comes across a new prospect, they aren't competing against other collectors. It's the scrapyard.
Tanks can bring $10,000 or $15,000 just due to the weight of their metal, whether or not they're running. So I'm always having to bid against people that are going to destroy the vehicle and just use it for scrap.
Because of the way Burnett utilizes his collection, some of the vehicles end up at the scrap heap anyway.
We ended up losing 2 vehicles, and the tide came back in, covered them over, so we had to report them to the Coast Guard as a hazard to navigation. Eventually, we did get them all winched to shore, although unfortunately, having had that much salt water, the vehicles were both had to be consigned to the scrap heap.
Burnett's fascination with all the vehicles in his collection lies in their ability to multitask.
Certainly is an element of entertainment there. They're very big toys, but more than that, they represent a lot of human effort that's gone into engineering a solution to a problem. I guess that's the thing I like the most.
They can go where others can't. And for Charles Burnett III, there's no better way to get around. The first motorized armored fighting vehicles were tractors with metal plates attached to provide protection to the driver and passenger. Modern Marvels Private Collections will return next on the History Channel. One of the world's most popular athletes, a golfing legend. Arnold Palmer's golf clubs are a reminder of some of the game's greatest moments. It's a collection that's the result of Palmer's pursuit of perfection.
I always felt like if I could design or have built a perfect golf club, then I could play a perfect game of golf. Of course, you know and I know that isn't really going to happen, but the closer you get to doing that, I always felt like the closer you could get to playing the way you'd like to play the game.
Housed in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, near the course where he first learned to play the game, Arnold Palmer's ever-evolving collection contains almost every type of golf club imaginable. He's used most of them on the course, and he's applied his own personal touch.
Some people like to read, some people like to do crossword puzzles. He likes to fill it with golf clubs.
Palmer modifies his golf clubs in an effort to improve his game. It's part of a daily routine, and he wouldn't have it any other way.
I spend 2-3 hours in the morning in the office and get most of my work done. Then a little time in the shop, fiddling with my golf clubs, playing with the golf clubs, fine-tuning them, let's call it. And then the rest of the day on the golf course, playing or practicing or doing something that I really enjoy doing.
He absolutely lives, breathes, eats, sleeps golf. Every day, that's all he wants to do. When we have a string of rainy days, it's very difficult for him because he just wants to get out there and play. And what's good is, in the meantime, he can go back in the shop and work on some ideas that he's had for a while.
When Palmer turned pro in 1954, most of the clubs he used did not have the benefits of today's scientific technology. Although performance was limited, he still tried to push the technological envelope.
One of the changes that Mr. Palmer did to golf clubs a good bit was either adding or removing weight. This is a stock McGregor putter with no modifications to it. This is one where the weight has been added. You can see he has welded weight on the bottom and ground it off to give it a nice smooth feel. There they are side by side.
Most of the golf tournaments that I won over the years, the Armour style or the blade putter was the putter I used, and some of those were probably about 80% weld, and because I had ground them down to the point where there was not much left. I think that that was some of the business that was fun for me.
His shop has all the tools to tinker and alter golf clubs, including a shaft extractor.
I'll show you how we do this. You just take this, lock it into place, and there's an epoxy bond that we use on the graphite. And I'm careful when I'm heating it not to heat it in one spot too much because that graphite will just melt. So I just touch it with a little bit of heat. That should do it. And then this is a hydraulic jack. It just pushes the head right off. There it is. And there's the shaft that we can now use and put in a new club.
Another tool is the iron bending machine. It's utilized to change the lie angle of the club or adjust the loft.
So what we do with this is grab a bending bar, lock it on the hosel, and you can bend this however you need to get it to the right lie and loft. And something that's interesting with Mr. Palmer is he can take a look at this club once he pulls it out of the machine, set it on the ground and say, well, it needs to be a half a degree higher in the lie angle. He doesn't even really use these gauges. The gauges are there for the novices like me when we're doing club work, when we need to have a number to go by. But he'll just be able to eyeball that and tell it if it's where it needs to be.
Palmer has won 92 tournaments in a career that spans more than half a century. But with all the experimenting Palmer's done over the years, it's not easy to recall which clubs were making golfing history.
We're asked constantly if we have, say, the putter that Mr. Palmer used when he won the 1960 Masters. The problem is he's constantly switching and changing clubs. I mean, he's actually won tournaments where he's used a different set of irons or a different driver every day of the round.
During practice, he selects his clubs based on how they feel. And Palmer's always mindful of his first stroke off the tee.
He's always looking for a little extra length. You know, that's the main criteria. Some of them may be a little bit more consistently accurate, but length is what he's primarily concerned with on his drivers.
Even the most consistent parts of his game sometimes fail him. When Palmer doesn't play well, his army of fans, known as Arnie's Army, do their part to aid their favorite golfer.
All he used to have to do when he was playing in a tournament was have a complaint about his putting printed in the newspaper, and immediately clubs would come in from fans saying, well, I read about your putting problems. I do great with this putter of mine. I'd like you to have it and try it. I think it'll help your putting.
Putters sent by fans may not have improved his game, but they sure make for a colorful collection.
Golf clubs that have been sent to me over the years go from rocket ships to bananas. And you think that may be an exaggeration, it's not.
Some of the more fun putters that we've received, not just one, but 4 people came up with the idea of using hammers as heads for putters. We also have the whole line of foods. We have one made out of a piece of corn. There's a fish, hot dog, and a banana. We also have one that looks like a Campbell's soup can, and from his friends at Pennzoil, of course, we have one that's a Pennzoil bottle.
There are 2,000 putters and more than 10,000 clubs in Palmer's collection.
If I have 10,000 golf clubs, I give 10,000 away too. A lot of the golf clubs have been sent to military guys that were overseas.
Some clubs have been given to pros. One in particular helped a fellow golfer named Tony Lima in 1964.
I suggested to him that he go play in the British Open at St. Andrews. And after a little grilling and pumping, he said, "Okay, Arnie," he says, "I will go to the British Open, but he says, I need your caddy and your putter." And I said, "Okay." And he won the British Open. I got more of a kick out of that than a lot of things that I've done in my life.
Even after 70 years on the course, Arnie is as serious as ever about golf. As long as he's playing and experimenting, his collection of clubs will continue to grow.
I'm one of the people that always look to the next day and say, well, you know, maybe I'll find something that will make this old guy play a little bit better golf tomorrow.
For Arnold Palmer, the collection reflects the best part of his golfing life. A collection of tools with which he crafted some of golf's greatest moments. The most sought-after clubs are the early 1400s long-nose woods. Much like a modern-day ice hockey stick, they were commonly used for over 400 years. Today, they are valued at anywhere between $3,650 and $100,000. He was the king of rock and roll. He drove expensive cars, wore fine clothes, and sported the finest jewelry money could buy. His everlasting stardom makes anything he possessed the most sought after of all collectibles.
There are so many people infatuated with Elvis because Elvis transcends all races and religions.
Billed as the world's greatest Elvis collection outside of Graceland, owner Chris Davidson has brought together memorabilia from the superstar's famous career. From blue suede shoes to Cadillac limousines, from jewelry to jumpsuits. If Elvis had it, Chris Davidson bought it. And it's all housed in the famed city where Elvis performed the most, Las Vegas.
Everybody expects to see something Elvis related when they come to Vegas. Elvis is most closely associated with the city because Vegas is a late night town and Elvis was a late night guy.
Chris Davidson's infatuation with Elvis began long ago.
I saw Elvis twice as a kid, once here in Las Vegas when I was about 12, and once again in Long Beach, California. After I saw him the first time, I was completely hooked.
When purchasing a new collectible, sentimental value is also important.
I actually like to collect things of Elvis's that meant a lot to him, which don't always necessarily relate to money. I have a piece that he gave to his father that's a poem, basically, that talks about how he's been to the top of the mountain and that he's had enough.
Davidson turned his admiration into a $5 million collection that spans every era of Elvis's career.
I bought my first Elvis piece at the '94 Las Vegas Hilton auction. It just went crazy from there. I just continued to buy items until I ran out of money.
In 1954, Elvis recorded That's All Right, the first of 5 singles released by Sun Records. Destined for success, he hit the road playing small clubs throughout the South.
This was Elvis's 1955 Cadillac limousine. Elvis slept in the back, he drove it, they put their equipment up on top. It's a very cool car.
Elvis purchased the limo with the money he received when Sun Studios sold his record contract to RCA. Another car in the collection is Elvis's black Mercedes.
I'm in that car a little over $300,000. It was purchased originally at auction at the first sale that I went to in '94, and it is the most expensive thing that I've ever paid for.
But cars weren't Elvis's only love. In January 1956, Elvis recorded a song named after a really cool pair of shoes. Elvis soon added a pair to his wardrobe on stage. The prized blue suede shoes are valued at $1 million. It didn't matter what Elvis wore. There was total pandemonium whenever he performed. Girls loved the way he swiveled his hips, while parents claimed the country's morals were eroding. But in 1958, Elvis entered a new era in his life that drastically altered more than his wardrobe.
Going into the Army was really both scary and huge for Elvis. Elvis wanted to be a good soldier and to do his part with America, but certainly very scary for him because he wasn't sure where his career would be when he came back.
The collection contains several items from Elvis's years in the military.
Here's the Army display case. There are some fabulous pieces here in this case. Inside this Army trunk, which was shipped by Elvis from Germany to Memphis, were the fatigues, which I also purchased from the Graceland auction. There were many documents related to Elvis's stay in Germany.
After he finished serving his country, Elvis wore this military coat on more than one occasion.
Elvis did a film called GI Blues as soon as he got out of the Army, and I purchased it from John Torog, who is the son of director Norm Torog, who directed 9 different Elvis Presley films.
In November 1960, GI Blues opened nationally to warm reviews and big box office sales. Elvis had more money than he ever dreamed and free time to do as he pleased.
Behind us is Elvis's boat. Elvis enjoyed boating up and down the Mississippi. He had a lot of downtime in between films in the 60s, and so he and the guys would go out and go skiing or fishing.
Although he remained dedicated to his film career, Elvis longed to perform back on the stage. In 1969, he returned to one of the few places he hadn't been a hit yet, Las Vegas. Elvis first performed in the city in 1956 to lukewarm response. Upon his return, he followed the advice of Las Vegas veteran Liberace.
Liberace's advice to him was, you'll be very memorable the more glitzy and glamorous that you are, which of course Liberace was, and of course Elvis really in the 70s developed and honed.
Elvis stormed the stage wearing outrageous jumpsuits and fine jewelry. And whenever Chris Davidson wants a touch of Elvis, he adorns himself with the King's personal possessions.
Jewelry is really my greatest fascination. I have many pieces that I own that are fabulous. The 42 karat Red Star Ruby ring is stunning. Elvis paid 75 grand for this ring and gave it to a friend of his, and I paid around 25 grand for the ring.
Each piece of jewelry in the collection is a rare, one-of-a-kind.
I also have a black medallion with Elvis spelled out in diamonds, which is very cool.
Although Elvis liked expensive jewelry, he was more interested in obtaining items related to his own personal safety.
In the 50s, when he did his performances, they would need to hire for extra security, police officers. And Elvis became fascinated with guns and badges, and so over the years collected a vast amount of badges and guns, with the ultimate badge being the DEA badge that he received from President Nixon.
At Elvis's written request, he met President Nixon in the White House to discuss the nation's widespread drug abuse. Nixon gave him a special agent's badge, which Chris Davidson purchased for $10,000. Ironically, it was Elvis's own use of prescription pills that would take a toll on him. On August 16, 1977, at 42 years of age, Elvis Presley died. Despite his death, his popularity has never faded.
The reason that fans refuse to let Elvis go is just because he was such a significant part of their life. Elvis was almost like a religious figure to many people. Elvis is actually the #2 recognized image in the world behind Mickey Mouse.
Elvis will always be the king of rock and roll, and Chris Davidson does not see the value of his collection diminishing anytime soon.
I've gone both ways with trying to, decide the future. I mean, we have several $1 million invested here, but ultimately I believe Elvis will stand the test of time.
He's in the hearts of millions of fans, and with collectors like Chris Davidson taking care of his most cherished mementos, Elvis is sure to live on forever. The very first guitar Elvis Presley owned at the age of 11 was purchased at the Tupelo hardware store in Mississippi for $7.75. Today, the guitar is valued at around $1 million. Modern Marvels Private Collections will return next on the History Channel. It's one of the finest sports collections in Hollywood today, and it belongs to one of our finest leading ladies. Acclaimed actor and director Penny Marshall, the star of the Emmy Award-winning show Laverne and Shirley, and director of the blockbusters Big and A League of Their Own. She loves everything about sports. Penny has the artifacts from the glory days, the tangible evidence of the incredible moments gone by, and the relationships with superstar athletes to make each item more than a keepsake. Born in the shadow of Yankee Stadium, Penny's been a sports fan all her life.
I'm from the Bronx, so we cut school and go to Yankee games and see Maris and Manila. He took the bus or the subway. The last thing you see before it goes underground is that slice of Yankee Stadium, which is the most beautiful view.
From an early age, she had a collector's instinct.
When I was little, I had baseball cards. I always collected some, but not to this extent. As you get older, you get nuts.
A struggling actress when she first came to Hollywood, her collecting was limited by a lack of funds. But with the success of Laverne and Shirley, she was able to start her dream collection. Her collectibles are divided into separate departments, each featuring a different sport. The older items are often the most valuable.
Baseball, history of our country. It was an American game, so I like that. This is the Negro Leagues, and those are from the Negro League fine balls.
Part of the collection isn't about the stars on the field, but the fans in the seats.
No, those are from the Polo Grounds. That's Yankee Stadium, the brown one. That's from Ebbets Field.
When a lucky fan catches a souvenir baseball, it's his dream to add the batter's autograph.
See, these are Yankees, and these are the Yankee World Series. I like this ball because it's the year of my birth, but we're not showing it up close because it's none of your business. I like the old timers, Satchel Paige, Walter Johnson, those. Here's Michael Jordan. Baseball. I lost that for 3 years. It was in the garage in a box.
One prized possession Penny couldn't pass up is this memento over Yankee hero Joltin' Joe DiMaggio. In 1941, the Yankee Clippers set a record that may never be broken.
This is a table someone made when DiMaggio went on his 56 hitting streak. And so there's 56 signed Joe DiMaggio balls in here.
Her bat rack reads like a Hall of Fame roster. And there's even an award to the player known as Charlie Hustle, Pete Rose.
This is one of my favorite things. It's for Pete Rose. Baseball Writers of Association of America presented Pete Rose with an award for exemplary conduct on and off the field.
But Penny is also a big round ball fan. An NBA season ticket holder, she's friends with many basketball superstars.
In the basketball section, I have balls that are from the 1999-2000 season, because I lived at the turn of the century.
Penny even drafts players to help get the rest of the team's signatures.
I sit near the visiting team, and I usually know someone on it. And so I'd see who was injured, like Alonzo Mourning was injured that year, and I said, I need this signed. And every time he says, I'm getting it, I swear. And so each player from each team got me a signed ball from their team.
After finally receiving the basketballs, Penny spent hours trying to identify and label the scribbled signatures.
You can't read these worth a darn. Now, so if they write their number, you bless them.
Like all sports collectors, she is wary of fraudulent merchandise, usually demanding a certificate of authenticity when purchasing autographed items. But even the most cautious of collectors can still be tricked.
Well, I've got this with a certificate, and Kobe was up here, and I said, oh yeah, I got a ball signed by you. He said, that's not my signature. I said, Kobe, it came with the thing. He said, it's not my signature. I said, but it came with the piece of paper that said. So he re-signed it.
When Penny participated in a charity event, she received Shaquille O'Neal's size 22 shoes and other collectibles.
This is Shaq's shoe, which is facing the wrong way. Shaq gave me, because I do a Shaq-tacular event. This my daughter got me. It's a Michael Jordan phone. For you Chicago fans.
Other superstar players in the basketball section include Magic, Bird, and Barkley. The unusual, one-of-a-kind Dennis Rodman doll is one of several collectibles of basketball's bad boy.
Dennis throws me the ball in the middle of the game. I went back, and then at the end, he gave me the shirt. So I went back and met him, and he signed it. That's why it says to Miss Marshall. got the best heart. Dennis, he really is a good-hearted person.
Some of her memorabilia pack a powerful punch.
You gotta get Ali. It's Ali's pants and top. Then we head into football. Joe Montana I directed in a commercial. Walter Payton, Sweetness and Gail Sayer. Jim Kelly, Steve Young.
Through her brother, film director Gary Marshall, she met one of her sports heroes on the set of a movie.
Johnny Unitas was there, and so he signed the football to me. So it's nice when you meet them personally. I mean, for me, he was a great player.
One of the most unique parts of the collection is the music library.
These are all sheet music to every baseball song ever written. So these are old. Old. I'm trying to see a date on something, 1885. So I think it's important that they know this team song.
For all her love of sports, Penny regrets she never really participated.
I wish I could have played sports. I wasn't quite encouraged when I was growing up. It wasn't something you were supposed to do. Girls weren't supposed to play ball.
In 1991, Penny directed the hit movie A League of Their Own, the story of the American Girls Professional Baseball League. When filming was completed, Penny's team presented her with some cherished mementos.
Yeah, the Bat the Cast sign. There's a ball over there, the crew sign. The cast made that shirt up there with all the pictures on it for just the crew members. And they signed that.
Each piece of the collection has been bought, begged, or bequeathed. But one of the most prized pieces came, one might say, from out of left field.
This is Faye Dancer, who Madonna's character was based on. These are some of the real players from the All-American Girls Baseball League. Now, this was sent to me by Garth Brooks, who I met once. And he had bought it in a charity auction. And he said, I thought you'd appreciate this. And it was so sweet of him. I mean, this is someone who I don't really know.
Penny's collection is very personal, since she's chosen items that have special meaning to her.
These are the best at what they do, and so I like to bask in the glory of others, I guess.
A mint 1909 Honus Wagner baseball card is worth over $1 million. Legend has it so few Wagner cards were made because he refused to have his name associated with the distributor, a tobacco company. Modern Marvel's private collections will return next on the History Channel. Star Wars, a science fiction adventure that captured the world's imagination and created an unprecedented merchandising phenomenon. The successful Hollywood fantasy spawned sequels, prequels, and billions of dollars in movie merchandise that would become some of the most sought-after collectibles on the planet. One man's passion for the groundbreaking film has driven him to scour the earth to acquire the largest and most valuable collection of Star Wars memorabilia in existence.
To think that I would have a 5,000 square foot barn filled with the Star Wars collection, no, not in my wildest imagination.
Steve has well over 100,000 pieces in his remarkable collection. It's made up of toys, posters, trading cards, action figures, and movie props. His collection is irresistible and can't help bring out the kid in anyone.
Would you believe this is a real lightsaber? Well, not exactly. There aren't such things as real lightsabers. This is a great prop replica from a company called Master Replicas, and you can actually make it work. Now, back up, please. This is only for pros. Cool, huh?
But not everything is a toy. Some of the more valuable pieces are to look at and not to play with. Some of these rare items were hard to find.
So here is the prototype R2-D2 lunch pail, the vinyl lunch pail that I searched for 10 years and finally found. Right over here is a very rare Boba Fett action figure with the missile firing mechanism still in it. That was never released because of product safety issues.
Row after row, shelf after shelf of Star Wars memorabilia. There are items from around the world, and everything in the collection has one thing in common. No two are alike.
This model is actually the three-dimensional blueprint of the full-size Millennium Falcon that was built 60 feet in diameter for Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And this is a kit that was built for me by a friend from Germany. He researched every single piece that they used to make the original Millennium Falcon. More than 2,400 pieces, all the model kits they bashed, and came up with this amazing model.
3,000 movie posters, practically every book about Star Wars ever written, and clothing in every size. It all began with the movie's release in 1977. Little did Steve Sansweet know it was the beginning of a Star Wars obsession.
Why does any collector collect? It's the passion. The movie blew me away. My background in loving science fiction, and I thought, this is the be-all, end-all. This is a movie that was entertaining. It was fun. I connected with it in a way I sort of related to the story of Luke Skywalker and his yearning to leave home.
Not long after seeing the movie, Steve began competing with kids at toy stores for the latest Star Wars memorabilia.
The great thing about being on the ground floor of what has become a collectible is the ability to go in the store and buy something for $1.97 that years later can be worth a lot more than $1.97.
One of the very first movies to widely market merchandise, no one knew for sure what Star Wars items would sell to the buying public. One of the first items produced was a Chewbacca mug. The character was inspired by George Lucas's dog, Indiana. With every sequel, there was more and more to buy, from miniature action figures to life-size characters.
So behind me is one of the icons of the Star Wars universe, the Han and Carbonite. And right next to him, of course, is the bounty hunter who captured Han, Boba Fett. Both of these are prop replicas and really nicely made. This, the Stormtrooper, is the character that everybody wants to be. And this is another prop replica from Don Post Studios.
Another full-size character is everybody's favorite droid, R2-D2.
R2 always got our heroes out of trouble. R2 was both a figure with someone inside to operate and move it back and forth. It was a mechanical figure which often broke down in the early days of filming Star Wars.
Over the years, the characters evolved, along with the size of the collection.
This is the way that Yoda looked in Empire Strikes Back, the original Yoda. You can tell that he has changed over the years. This is the Yoda up here from Episode 2. That's a licensed item. Yoda, the fighting Jedi, becomes a lot fiercer. When I was down in Australia, I had an action figure made of myself. They asked me what figure I wanted the body on, and of course I said Obi-Wan, having the beard, that sort of worked pretty well.
In 1991, he finally got the chance to purchase something that couldn't be bought in a store, but it would mean spending more than he ever imagined.
I had the opportunity to purchase some actual props from the producer of the first two Star Wars movies. And that was a sizable expenditure. And the only way I could do that was to get a second mortgage on my house. And so I can still remember the guy who was selling it saying, "So which of these do you think you want to buy?" And I said, "All of them."
As he continued to accumulate everything Star Wars, cost wasn't the only problem.
We kept adding floors on as the collection kept growing. And even after I added on to the house, I ran out of space, and I got one storage locker, which eventually became 5 storage lockers. So space was a problem.
As the collection became so big, Steve had to hire a curator to organize, catalog, and continue searching for new items. But Steve still holds the collection closest to his heart.
The question about whether you have a favorite piece is sort of like saying to the proud parents of 8 children, which is your favorite kit? I love some of the props, but I also love things that fans have made. There's a friend of mine in Mexico City who makes out of tin plate Star Wars models. And, he makes one for himself and one for me.
Steve doesn't have a favorite piece, but he knows where visitors like to hang out.
At the end of a long, hard day, when I come home from work, there is a place I go to unwind and relax. And when I have friends over, it's where I find them all of the time.
Sansweet's passion for everything Star Wars would inspire him to write 9 Star Wars books and get a new job.
I took a giant leap, left the Wall Street Journal, joined Lucasfilm as sort of a Star Wars ambassador.
Although he appears to have everything any Star Wars collector could imagine, Steve is not about to call it quits.
If you stop looking, it's no more fun. You know, so even if you don't buy, the search is fun. I look everywhere. I look on eBay or go to toy stores. I have friends all over the world who buy for me. I'm what you call a completist. I want everything that's made of Star Wars, anywhere in the world.
For most, collecting is an escape. But for Steve Sansweet, Star Wars is more than that. His collection is a part of his identity. A house of horrors. Home to some of the most frightening creatures imaginable. A place where your worst nightmares become reality. It's a collection of the dark and scary. But to owner Ron Singer, it's a startling good time.
No one has a haunted attraction as a collection, as a private collection.
Ron Singer collects creepy creatures.
My piece here is actually one of my first pieces I ever bought. It's called the Electric Frankenstein.
His personal house of horrors is home to over 30 mechanical monsters worth over $300,000, with names like the Burning Ballerina, the Butcher Pig, and Flying Ghoul. No one knows what evil is waiting to surprise, shock, and horrify.
We have an old lady that comes down a flight of stairs sitting in a wheelchair. I have a 15-foot monster demon that bends down and opens his mouth and tries to swallow you.
By day, Singer is a pediatric dentist.
Hi guys, how are you? It's time for your appointment. Come on back.
His office is packed with fun-filled memorabilia and pop culture to amuse his patients and parents.
Should we check it out, see if he's going to speak?
Go to the dentist!
They're prepared to be frightened, not by Dr. Singer's drill, but with their exclusive annual invitation to Moeller Manor, Singer's personal haunted house located nearby.
I share this Moeller Manor twice a year for charities, for the community, and we'll see in a weekend, we'll see probably 5,000 to 6,000 people come through. And usually they're running out screaming, or they're crying, or they're laughing.
The collection is contained in a 5,000 square foot haunted warehouse and is filled with Dr. Singer's toys.
I consider Moeller Manor to be my hobby, my passion, my obsession. They're my private collection.
15 years in the making. Many of the pieces at Moeller Manor have been difficult to find.
It's a storyline, so it's quite particular of what I'm looking for, and it's a very slow process.
Once showpieces have been bought, they are then strategically placed for maximum fright.
I've had people walk through 3 or 4 times, and every time they walk through it, they say, geez, I didn't see that the first time, or I didn't see that the second time. It's because to sit and really take it in, you'd have to stand in one room for a good 10-15 minutes, look at it, enjoy it, and take it all in and move on.
All who dare to enter know this experience is better than any haunted house.
The planning also in the design for Moeller Manor was everywhere you turned, there was something to stimulate your senses.
Singer hired a professional production designer to create detailed sets around each piece of the collection.
The jail bars, believe it or not, were created out of PVC pipe that were painstakingly hand-painted.
This full-scale maze combines both synthetic and natural materials.
We have one large tree that's actually a cave you walk through, and that, believe it or not, stands 20 feet tall, and that's all carved by foam. And the leaves and mushrooms that come out of it are all real.
Special effects make the experience all the more convincing.
As you walk through the graveyard, flashing bits of thunder, and it's all integrated with my light posts dim their lights, from the thunderstorm. So we have tried to make it very authentic.
Many of the monsters come right from the silver screen. No haunted collection would be complete without this classic horror icon.
Welcome to Frankenstein's laboratory. In the laboratory, we have special effects. A Jacob's Ladder, which is right out of the 1930 movie, which is a bolt of electricity that rises up between two electronic wire beams. And then, of course, the Frankenstein and his bride are notorious for their films in the early 30s.
Released in 1931, Frankenstein starred Boris Karloff as the monster. Dr. Singer has added details that relate to other movies.
And with the laboratory, always you need a physiology chart for anatomy to let you know what parts to dissect. And also, you can't be without Igor and the scientist.
Over the years, Singer has also collected other cinematic greats.
I have Michael Myers, and I have Jason in the cornfield, and that was his famous position before he would attack his victims.
Most of the figures in the collection are animatronics powered by air pressure. Unbeknownst to visitors, their own movements are triggering the monsters into action.
The animatronics and machines are set off usually by 3 or 4 different means, and one can be a pressure pad that we mask on the floor, and we camouflage it and paint it into the concrete.
When a visitor steps on the pad, the effect is activated. Other sensors are infrared beams and sound. Not only is each piece in the collection designed to scare, but each room has a different theme.
You're walking through periods of time. You're walking through a cobblestone yard, maybe in England. You move into a new graveyard with a Victorian mansion theme. And then as you walk into this beautiful mansion with twinkling lights in the hallway, you see an old grandma in her wheelchair at the top as she greets you. And then you walk into the music conservatory and the ballerina room where she's dancing. But it's a wonderful effect.
And then there's the kitchen where even a psycho pig can have his way.
The pig is sitting there with a chainsaw, and of course, because everything's been done to him and his family members over the years, he in turn now is returning the favor.
When Dr. Singer finds a new piece for the collection, he doesn't hesitate to make the purchase. One piece alone cost him $17,000.
It's basically on a per order basis. So some years a couple are made and some years none are made. And after 1 or 2 years, it's no longer available. So the collection I have here is absolutely rare items.
His favorite is the Witch's Cauldron.
It's where 2 old haggard witches are over a big cauldron and they're stirring it and they're cackling and giving incantations. The detail is phenomenal. I mean, it's a collector's piece of 1 of 3.
Even though he has no room to expand, Moeller Manor is still a work in progress.
I think as a collector, you're never content. I think you're always looking around that next corner. You're always looking to add something else, something that'll make your collection more special. It is a definite priority in my life. Could be possibly demented.
Kelly, you're on.
Oh, hi. Sorry about that. Just helping the guys out here in the shop. Hope you enjoyed that look at private collections. Be sure to join us next time when we hit the highway for an exciting look at more boys' toys. For the History Channel, I'm Kelly Monaco. Thanks for watching. Oh, your car is done.
You fixed it?
Yeah, I can do more than just dance, you know.
The artists who played them.
Celebrity guitars have value higher than non-celebrity guitars that really doesn't relate to the value of the guitar as much as it relates to the aura of the celebrity who owned it or played it.
The collection includes pieces once owned by Lenny Kravitz, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Jimi Hendrix's Stratocaster.
Jimmy had thousands of Strats, but he only had one Jazzmaster since he became Jimi Hendrix, and this guitar is a real special feeling guitar.
Segal loves rock and roll, but the roots of his collection are in the blues.
It's the people who made blues come to life in the United States of America and all over the world.
He owns 4 guitars from B.B. King, which all hold his signature name of Lucille.
I don't have one favorite. There are certain sort of spiritual guitars that have tremendous spiritual meaning to me, like the Tele that Albert Collins used a lot.
Albert Collins earned the name the Master of the Telecaster.
And he himself put this kind of psychedelic sticker on here, and I think he was one of the greatest blues guitar players of our time.
But Steven Segal believes that the birth of the blues is represented elsewhere in his collection.
I was born and raised in the blues, and so if you really play blues, I think you have to be able to play an acoustic also.
Segal owns many old acoustics, which are reminiscent of the blues. But some of the rarest and greatest acoustic guitars in Segal's collection are manufactured by Martin Guitars.
I have a lot of old Martins, pre-war Martins.
Segal's pre-World War II D45 is considered one of the best-sounding acoustic guitars in the world.
It has the snowflake inlay on the neck, but it also has tuners that are factory tuners that are kind of gold. There's only a few of those in the world.
You hear stories about the D45s in particular, a guitar that sold new for $225, trading in the market for anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000, depending on the condition.
C.F. Martin started his guitar company nearly 2 centuries ago. Since then, they have successfully produced many of the finest collectible guitars known to man.
The craftsmanship is impeccable.
Taking over 2 years to build, the 1 millionth Martin is the rarest and most valuable guitar they have ever crafted. It has 30 rubies, 40 diamonds, and is surrounded by 18-karat gold.
It's such a magnificent piece of art, you know. You can't argue with it at all. I mean, this is a museum piece.
They're going to be, pretty rare.
For Segal, judging the collectability of
here until about 1985. I came here to study the martial arts, Aikido, Karate, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu.
Part of Segal's martial arts training included the use of the sword. Once he began to master the weapon, he started his most beloved collection.
I probably had 10 to 12 swords that were, within the history of Japan, amazingly important and significant.
Samurai warriors emerged during the Heian period, from 794 to 1185. These warriors were sought after by feudal lords for protection from rival clans. Battles were constant and fierce. Many of the swords were modified to reduce the weight.
Here you have a sword that's almost 1,000 years old, and it feels, I can't even feel the weight in my hand. I feel like a feather. The balance is that good.
Crafted by repeatedly heating and pounding steel, making a sword was more than just an act of labor. It was also a sacred ritual.
When these sword masters made a sword, they didn't eat for sometimes weeks. They fasted, they prayed, they went inside the Katana Kaji, and they made something that was supposed to be exemplary of their own spiritual quest.
Upon completion, a blade would frequently be tested for sharpness and durability on the bodies of deceased criminals. The results were often documented on the handle.
It'll say, this sword cut through 5 bodies as a test, and sometimes it's in gold.
Seagal considers it an honor to own such ancient historic symbols. More than just weapons, he believes they are well-designed works of art.
To us, it's like looking at a Picasso or a Rembrandt, but these are older.
Collecting swords can be an expensive proposition.
Swords can go upwards of $1 million just by virtue of what they are, not necessarily who they belong to.
But swords aren't his only passion. He also has a collection of almost 300 guitars. Many of these instruments were hard to find.
I collect guitars because I'm a serious player, and I've been playing since I was a child. And I love guitar, and I play all kinds of different music.
Seagal uses his collection in the studio and on stage. Unlike other musicians and collectors, he is willing to risk some of his most prized guitars by taking them on the road.
I travel with these, I just don't let them out of my sight.
Not only are the guitars rare, they're made more valuable by the
date-coded true Hemi motor. I have a race radiator on it. Carburetor was made by Demon Carburetors. They put the nitrous system on it for me. This car is nothing but business.
Named for the engine's hemispherical combustion chamber, Dodge's 5.7-liter Hemi V8 produces 345 horsepower. Goldberg can add a quick burst of speed with his nitrous oxide injection system.
Throws nitrous oxide right straight down through the carburetor, which gives you anywhere from a 50 to 300 to 400 horsepower boost.
For Goldberg, each car is a reminder of his past. His Shelby GT500 evokes painful memories.
There's a lot of emotion going into buying a car. Every day that I was sitting in my orthodontist chair as a kid and he was cranking on my teeth and causing me so much pain, the only positive thing that I could derive from that experience was looking out the window at his 1967 GT500 that was British Racing Green. So guess what? Now I have one.
Designed by champion race car driver Carroll Shelby, the Mustang GT is powered by a 500 horsepower 428 Super Cobra Jet engine.
This is the one that I always envisioned buying when I started my collection. This was the one car that I wanted to obtain.
For Goldberg, the thrill is in the fun. Many of his cars are purchased at auction.
It's absolutely wonderful experience, and it's really hard not to get caught up in it. First year I went, I bought a car that I had no idea that I'd buy.
Goldberg has enlisted Bob Johnson, a car broker, to search for the perfect cars to add to the collection.
Anytime you are collecting muscle cars or collecting anything for that matter, there's always going to be forgeries, there's always going to be misrepresentations. You're always running that risk of being duped, and fortunately that's what Bob Johnson's for.
Johnson helped with the purchase of a 1968 Camaro Supersport Yenko for $106,000.
It's a 4-speed 427, totally original car. 40,000 miles on it, clicked 40,000 when I got in the garage. I put 13 miles on it since. It's just one unbelievably fast car. It was basically made to drag race.
There were only 32 1968 Chevy Yenkos made with a 427 engine. But that's not the rarest vehicle in the collection. That distinction belongs to the lawman. The 1,000 horsepower 429 Superboss was commissioned by the military to teach soldiers how to handle a muscle car because of the growing number of racing casualties while on leave. Only 2 were ever.
Hi, I'm Kelly Monaco, and welcome again to Boys Toys Week on the History Channel. I'm in this body shop because it's here that cars, a boy's toys favorite, are made to look their very best. For the next few hours, we've got more than just cars. We're going to take an exciting look at private collections. Everything from motorcycles to sports memorabilia to military vehicles. We'll also show you Steven Seagal's guitars and 10,000 golf clubs that belong to Arnold Palmer. You don't want anything to stop you from missing it. It's coming up right now, only on the History Channel.
They're classics, defined by power, speed, and brute force. This collection is not for the weak or timid. These cars are just like their owner, all muscle.
Why do I collect muscle cars? I think it fits the persona pretty well. You know, I didn't intend it to be that way, but it's just the person that I am.
Every car in his collection has an intimidating roar. With a few modern-day exceptions, he's based his collection on the cars of his youth.
When I was a kid, most of my friends had older brothers. Most of those older brothers were into muscle cars. And I always looked up to them, you know, and always wanted to be like them because they had these cool cars.
After success as an NFL football player and international stardom as a professional wrestler, Goldberg began the car collection of his dreams.
I got to a position where I could fortunately purchase one, and 1 led to 2, and 2 led to 5, and 5 led to 10, and I think 10's led to 20, and you know, the sky's the limit. I personally don't believe I'll ever stop collecting these things. They're so much fun.
Muscle cars were first made in the 1960s. Often called supercars, they utilized high-performance factory engines built for race cars. The one that fits Goldberg the best is a customized clone of a 1970 Chrysler Challenger.
I had built to my specifications exactly how I wanted it. Visually, performance-wise, it came out exactly how I wanted it. It couldn't be any more beautiful as far as I'm concerned.
The body is original, but under the hood, it's far from standard.
One thing that makes it special is that it's a 1968
made.
One was crushed in transit. They were predominantly used in Air Force bases and aircraft carriers to make runs, you know, do quarter miles or do 1/8 miles.
Purchased at auction for $118,000, the Lawman is housed at the Muscle Car Museum in Tennessee. It is the only car in the collection he's never driven.
Honestly, the only reason why I haven't driven it is because I've never seen it. When I see it, I guarantee you I will get behind the wheel and I will drive that thing.
The most expensive car in Goldberg's collection is a contemporary one.
If you want a Ferrari, if you're not on the list, then you have to wait. You have to buy a used Ferrari.
Goldberg paid over $200,000 for the Ferrari Modena. The car is powered by a 3.6-liter V8 engine with a top speed of 185 miles an hour.
Listening to it, smelling it, driving it is almost as cool as just sitting here looking at it.
Like the Ferrari, Goldberg's 1959 Chevy Biscayne is painted his favorite color, black.
That's a classic car, you know. All you gotta do is look at the fins in the back. This is my beach car. Seems as if it'd be pretty cool with my surfboard hanging out the back of it.
Goldberg is in the process of relocating his collection from Atlanta, Georgia to Southern California. A 15-car garage is being built to house all the vehicles. Even though he collects for pleasure, there is a business side to owning these expensive cars.
I find that these cars definitely hold their value in good and bad times in the economy.
They're powerful and complement his muscular physique. This is one collection that seems to fit its owner's persona perfectly. As the sun sets on a world champions collection in the West, it soon rises on the larger-than-life collection of Steven Seagal. He's an international action superstar, known for his martial arts skills and signature ponytail. But when this big-screen hero isn't on the set of his latest movie, you'll most likely find him collecting the things he loves.
I have some of the best swords in the world. And I have some of the best guitars in the world.
I think he's happy with both the guitar and sword in his hand. One at a time, of course.
His passion for swords began in the country where he sought enlightenment, Japan.
I came here in the late 60s, early 70s, and stayed